Hey, how's it going? So happy you could join us here today. Today I'm going to be doing a beautiful little painting of a place I used to go when I was a boy called Camp Crystal Lake. Hell, I remember playing around with my little friend Jason. He was such a rascal. And I wonder what that boy's up to now. But before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and run all the colors we're going to be using across the bottom of the screen. And I'm not going to be able to keep this up, so I'm going to jump out of character and then just get into painting the little scene. If you were to look around this room, you'd probably assume that reverse glass art is my passion in life. And while that's partially true, there's one thing that trumps that, and that is my love for all things horror. I'm absolutely mad about old horror films, old horror books, horror art, all of that sort of stuff. For every book, print, or work of art that I've got on the subject of reverse glass art or sign painting, I've got double that on the subject of horror, horror literature, horror art, and stuff like that. So you can imagine my surprise and elation when someone contacted me and offered to make me a custom Jason Voorhees mask. So it's on the wall behind me now, and it's going to remain there for the foreseeable. It's going to be in the background of all my videos. This is made by a guy called Bare Bones, who is a prop artist and is absolutely amazing. The attention to detail is just blown me away. So thank you so much for that. I honestly appreciate it so much, and I absolutely love it. So you can check out Bear's stuff. I'll put a link to his Etsy shop and the kind of stuff that he's putting out there with his prop making on Facebook. So got to check it out. It's absolutely brilliant. And, even if horror art is not your thing, I think it's great to just support craftsmen who make one-off pieces with their hands. I think it's a brilliant thing. So thank you, mate. Absolutely love it. But it doesn't end there. He also offered to vectorize the Camp Crystal Lake sign, which is the camp in the original Friday the 13th film. And he sent that over to me a few weeks ago, and that's going to be the subject of today's video. So I'm going to be making a big Camp Crystal Lake mirror. I'm going to be covering a couple of techniques that I haven't done so far on the channel, so hopefully you'll enjoy it, even if the kind of subject matter is not your cup of tea. But before we get into that, if you're a fan of reverse glass, sign painting, digital processes, gold leaf, and much more, then you're in the right place, because that's all this channel's about, and I try to release a video every couple of weeks. Also, if you'd like to support the channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the description. There's also a link to buy me a coffee if you ever fancied buying me a drink. There's a link to the Facebook group. Really, really good group of artists on there. It's about 1,300 now, all sharing ideas, helping each other out. It's a really good place to go if this is something you want to get into. There's also a link to my Etsy shop where I sell some of my designs and the merch store. Anyway, that out of the way, let's crack on with it. Okay, so I'm going to be starting the step-by-step tutorial from this point. And basically, if you haven't seen any of my videos before, I've done a lot which cover the mirror making process. So I'm going to put a link to those in the top corner and in the description of the video. So in a nutshell, what I've done up to this point is I've uploaded my design into a bit of software called Vinyl Master. That connects to a vinyl cutter, which is very similar to a printer. You just click cut and it will cut that design into a roll of self-adhesive vinyl. It's done in reverse and then applied to the back of the mirror. I'll pick out the sort of bits that I want to be my painted areas, and then I sandblasted those. And then you're sandblasting the sort of back coating off the mirror, and anything that's protected by the vinyl won't be sandblasted away. So this is where we're at, and the design's on there. Looks pretty nice, so it's time to move on to the sort of first step in the painting process. Now, I want this to look like quite a weathered sign. A Camp Crystal Lake sign is outdoors, so I want it to look like it sort of had rain and sun, the paint sort of cracked over time. This isn't essential if you were going to remake this particular sign, but I think it's going to look quite nice. So I'm using this product here, which is a two-part process, and you apply, which one's that? No, you apply base coat, leave that for an hour, and then apply the top coat, and then when that dries, it kind of just cracks and gives that sort of faux cracked paint effect. So I'm going to do that now. That's which one is it? Here we go. Yeah, so I'll do that now, and then I'll show it in time lapse drying, just because it's quite nice to watch it sort of all suddenly sort of crackle. But it's a really, really basic, easy product to use. It sort of looks like a sort of runny PVA glue and smells like it as well. It's water based, so you can just wash your brushes under the tap, So I'm just going to pour this on rather than dipping it in. And in this case, you know, it's am I using the right one? Base coat, yep. So I just want to kind of cover this evenly. And it doesn't matter about all the brush strokes and stuff like that, that's absolutely fine. But I want it on even, not too thick. I think in the past, when I have used this, the thickness it might just be me seeing things, but I think it might determine the sort of how sort of big the cracks are and sort of how far apart they are. Like if it was like really, really thin coat, you get these really close together tiny little cracks, and then, well, and the opposite with a sort of thicker coat. So yeah, you can see nice and easy, and then I'm just going to leave that for about an hour, and it won't matter when I come back to it, it will be sticky. And when I first used this product, it says wait for it to dry, and I thought I was waiting like overnight, and it was still tacky. So I went with it, and it was fine. So you don't have to wait for it to properly dry. And if I can find it, I'll put a link to these products in the description of the video as well. So yeah. Anyway, that's that process, so we'll leave that and then come back and apply the second one. Right, so for all the text and a few little ornamental parts, I've just gone in with solid colour right over the back of the crackle paste. And that gives quite a nice effect. It means from a distance, it sort of looks like a solid colour, but when you get close up, you can see those really nice sort of crack details. That isn't going to work for the rest of this. So what I'm going to do is start aging the rest of the sign. That's because some of the sort of actual bits of the scene of Camp Crystal Lake are going to be quite light, and I don't want the light colours to run into the cracks, you know, so I'd rather that was a sort of darker, sort of old colour that sort of ages it a bit. So I'm going to go with this Oxford Ochre, which is a sort of pooey colour, for want of a better word. Well, it's sort of a mixture between, well, it's sort of browny, mustardy. It's not particularly nice colour, but I'm going to use that. I'm going to put it into just a little tub like this and then thin it down, because all I want this to do is sort of act like an ink. I don't want this to really tone everything I'm rubbing it on. I just want it to sort of run into the gaps. God, making a mess already. Right, let's clean myself up. So, just going to pop a little bit of this in here. Shouldn't need much. Oh. Pop a bit of white spirit in here. Really should prepare for when I'm going to be making a mess. Do this every time and I'll just get paint everywhere, be all over the floor, the table, and I get in trouble. Wow. Right, so I'm going to mix this up. And you can see, well, I hope you can see, that is much, much runnier than your standard sign writing enamel. I want that so it's very liquidy. I'm going to give that a real good mix. Oh, there we go again, splashing it everywhere. All right. Then I'm just going to get this onto here and give this a really good rub. And you might be able to see it's sort of making it, you know, look a little bit tea stained, which is good, you know, and you know it'll stay wet enough wet for long enough. If you think it's a bit too tea stained, we can always, run a load of white spirit over it. Or if, when you put it on, you think some areas seem a little bit more affected than others, again, just do what I'm doing here, but with just neat white spirit instead of the white spirit mixed with the paint. Right, so while I was doing that last time lapse, I realised I was using a technique that I haven't covered on this channel, so thought I'd better film that and explain what I was doing. So, using a Brillo pad, or that's what they're called here, like a sort of washing up pad, a scouring pad. This is a knackered one, but it doesn't matter, I don't need the rough side. And to be honest, it doesn't have to be a Brillo pad, it can just be a sponge, but these are just so cheap and you get them in multi-packs, so it doesn't matter about cutting them up. Anyway, what I was using was the sponge to blend the sort of two tones together. So I'd painted up to a certain point with the light colour, used the sponge, dipped it in, and then sort of done a sort of stippled effect all over where I'd done the line, and then painted it with the darker colour. I did the same in the lake, where not so much of a blend from one gradient to another, but just sort of done some lighter patches as you'd sort of get on the lake, sort of around the highlights. And I'm going to do exactly the same for the foliage and the hills and stuff like that. So, looking at the actual Camp Crystal Lake sign, this area here is all sort of bushes and trees. This is a shoreline that's green, and these hills in the background are green. So, I'm going to start by adding the lighter colours first, and then, when we've sort of built up a load of nice sort of light colours, we'll then just go over with a dark green. So, where's my white? I've got one somewhere. Oh no. Right, so I'm going to start with yellow. And not very strong, just going to kind of get it on the sponge and then use the kind of a bit of kitchen paper to make sure that that's all nice and... Is that the right one? Yellow chrome. Yep, all good. So mix that up. So really nice bright yellow here. And then you can cut these to the sort of size you need depending on the piece that you're doing. And I tend to use the sort of corners and the edges as much as the sort of flat bit as well. So into my sponge. There's plenty on there, that's probably too much. So I'm going to wipe that off, give it some real good dabs on here. And then I'm just going to start by using like the corner. Give myself a nice sort of edge. Not sure how well that is. Remember, this is dabbing it. I'm not swiping it. I'm going up and down. And that's giving me a really nice kind of almost autumnal look. Well, anyway, because this is going to be the sort of foliage of the trees. So I'm going to do a tiny little bit of the yellow as well on this, on these back sort of hills or mountains or whatever they are. Mainly around the sort of shoreline, because that's where the trees would be. So keeping the sort of lighter areas closer to the water's edge. And just dabbing straight over the top of it. Not too thick, although, it's art, not science, so, it's however you want it to look. Again, I'm going to be going lighter around the bottom. And take that up, mix some black in with this green. Right, so we're on to the very last bit now, which is creating that really nice natural wood grain effect. So firstly, just with a soft brush, I'm just going to brush across here and make sure that none of the loose bits of kind of tissue paper that I'd used to clean it before on there, which I can see there are a few. So I just want to make sure I'm dust-free, paper-free, all of that sort of thing. And what I've got is this colour, yellow chrome, but I mean, it's just yellow. Any old yellow will do. So I'm just going to give this a really good mix. And different to what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to apply this all over everything, but I need it to be sort of much more fluid than sign writing enamel, which is quite viscous. So I'm going to be mixing it with a little bit of linseed oil and a little bit of paint thinner. Now don't worry about the ratios. This is just, you know, it's just by eye, and if you get it out by a little bit, it's not going to matter at all. So I use these little things that I think I've got like 100 of them for about £8. They're really handy and save making a mess. So just going to put the yellow into my little tub, a bit more than that. That'll probably do. It doesn't look like a lot, but once it's got the paint thinner in and the linseed oil, that'll add to the volume, and that'll be plenty. So, right, here's another one. These little droppers, again, these are handy. They're cheap. You get them in packs of 100. So I'm just going to put a little bit in. This just, I don't know, it makes the paint go on really smoothly. This is like when I very first learned how to do reverse glass art on the Dave Smith course. I didn't learn how to do like brush blending, so I sent him an email and said, how do you do the brush blending? He'd said the mixture of linseed oil, paint thinner, and the paint is the way to go, just because it means you haven't got to work so quickly. Now, I'm not doing brush blending here, but I'm doing something that's going to, you know, require the paint to sort of be really smooth, you know, especially because, you know, there are sort of grooves within this where I've done the crackle paste, and I want this to go on like super smooth. So, oh God, no matter all the precautions I take, I always just make a right mess. So anyway, that's going to be about right. Not that you'll be able to see, but it's much more watery than your standard sign writing enamel. And I've just got a brush here, and I'm gonna get this all over it. So I just want this on nice and sort of evenly all over the whole thing. And again, this, don't worry about this. You're probably looking at this thinking he ain't mixed enough paint. Don't worry. This is not the sort of final coat. This is the you know, what we're going to use to make the effect. So let's just get that on. I think I might need a little bit more thinner in that. So what I'm going to do is just put some paint thinner in there. So that's just sort of not quite neat, but pretty much. And I'm just going to get that across here, because I do want this to be super thin. You know, this has got to be able to be worked for a little while. That's more like it. That looks much more watery. See that going on much better now. So again, you can see I probably had the wrong ratio at the start, and then, you know, you've got plenty of time with this. It's not going to dry, you know. And even if you get it on and you think, oh, I've messed it up, if you just poured white spirit on that now, that's not going to affect anything in terms of the paint that's dry, but it is just going to, you know, be able to completely strip all of the wet paint. Right. So there we go. And now the sort of the secret ingredient, or the magic tool, and that's this, and it's a wood grainer. And you see that pattern, and all I'm going to do is put that at the one point of the sign. Sorry, I'll do it this way. And then as I drag it down, I'm going to go like that. You don't have to go right to the end like that. You can go halfway like that, and then sort of keep dragging and do it like this. It's going to create a nice sort of natural wood grain effect. So let's do it. Not struggling on those little bumps, but let's not worry about that. Remember, this is quite a rustic sort of sign. Now, ordinarily these are used on sort of smooth surfaces, and you can get really, really natural sort of wood grain effect, but this will work just fine on here. I'm just going to dab the excess off it, and firstly just do a few rough drags across there, and you get two ends. So there's a sort of end for doing the sort of finer grooves, which we can do, just sort of drag that across. It'll be best if you do it if you're not wiggling your hands. Let's just smooth that across here. And this colour, what we're doing here, this is the brightest that we're going to go with the yellow. So I'm then going to kind of mix a little bit of that, what was it called, Oxford ochre, with the yellow, and that'll give us our sort of, the bit what's going to go in the gaps. So quite subtle still, That's it, that's going on nice now. You can see if this wasn't thinned, this would be a nightmare. That wouldn't be, you wouldn't be making that pattern at all. A touch more there, it needs. And that looks good. You can see that sort of mimicking the natural wood grain. I mean, it's very different. I can see a little bit there where that's sort of messed up, so I'm just going to go over that bit again. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. But you've got ages. I'm going to leave this to dry now. That's probably going to take about 4 hours to dry just because of the linseed oil and the paint thinner in it. So if you're sort of looking at the, I don't know, say for example this here, just notice that. Easy, let's just get over that. Have a little bit there. So you can just crack on with this and it's not gonna, it's not gonna matter. Anyway, let's leave that to dry and come back and give it the second coat. Right, on to the very last bit, which is just to sort of back it all up with the colour of our choice. Now, I'll just show you what I've done. So after I stopped the last video, I sort of continued going, applied a bit more of the yellow paint with the thinner in it, and this is the result I've come up with. So see, it looks good, but I mean, it doesn't look anything special at the moment, but you can sort of start to see that wood grain. And now, hang on, I'll just pop my camera back up here. Now it depends how sort of prominent you want that wood grain to look. So I'm going to go with the Oxford ochre, which is the sort of browny colour. But I mean, even if you went on that with black, it's not going to be fitting or in keeping with this sort of original design, which is what I'm trying to replicate, but it'd still look really nice. You'd have this sort of really nice contrast, and the fact that we did the sort of crackle paste before means that it'll have all the bits of yellow and that Oxford ochre within the cracks. And yeah, I just think it'll look really nice. So this is really all down to you, and depending on how contrasty you want the sort of wood effect to be. So all I'm going to do is just use a sort of standard paintbrush and just paste over the whole thing with undiluted, cyanide enamel. When I say undiluted, I mean I'm not going to thin it, because I want this to be proper opaque. This is going to be our backing coat. That's going to make everything solid, and that's it. So just do that and then see what it looks like, eh?
Did you know that a young boy drowned the year before those two others were killed? The counselors weren't paying any attention. They were making love while that young boy drowned. Jason should have been watched every minute. He wasn't a very good swimmer. We can go now, dear.